talk about the state of balance. So with the body, it has various systems to bring about balance within the body. So say with our movement, we're able to move, we're able to keep our balance as we move. And we have the nervous system throughout the body, which is connected to the brain, which is able to adjust the body in order to maintain a state of balance. And so this is concerned with the physical body. It's composed of these elements of earth, water, fire, and air. And if those elements get in an unbalanced state, if there are changes that occur, then illness arises in the body and there's painful feelings that come up. So if, for example, the body gets too cold or it gets too hot, then it moves out of its state of balance and sickness arises. And so also when we eat, we need to try to eat in a way that's in balance as well, that's just right. And if we eat too much, then the body gets out of balance. Also needs to produce all of these different chemicals, so insulin, for example, that helps the blood stay in balance so that it's not too acidic and it's not too alkaline. There's not too much sugar or too much fat. But if any of these get out of balance, then illness arises. And so that's with regards to the body. And if we're going to speak about the mind, then you try to get the mind in a state of balance. You need to try to let go. And so if any unskillful states arise, then we try to abandon those states. And for meritorious, skillful states, we try to bring those to a state of completion. We try to make it so they're in balance and whole, don't we? So with regards to abandoning demeritorious or harmful actions, that we understand that already. This is with regards to sila Dhamma, to virtue, that we keep the 5 precepts, or like as sincere practitioners like yourself, keeping the 8 precepts. And when you keep the 8 precepts, then you're also monastics, yoga vacharas, and so yogis, people who have the goal and are really set on reaching a state of liberation, freedom. And so this already is an exalted state to be in. And it's very few, the people who have this desire for liberation. So it shows that you've all seen the state of dukkha, of suffering, and that you have the wisdom to be able to see that. And that you've seen that there is stress in old age, sickness and death, in being separated from one another. And even though in our lives now we may have everything in a complete and whole state, but one day we'll have to be separated from the people that we love. Even though we may have a lot of wealth that we have accumulated already, we need to be separated from that. And so we contemplate in this way that this is stressful, that this is suffering. So what then can we do to not be separated again? And so we need to try to find this, and find the state where we don't have to meet with separation. And that state is the mind, which is whole and complete, where there's no attachment there, where the heart is set on the path to Nibbana, and the heart becomes pure. And so Nibbana, it's not too far away from us. It's something that we can reach through our efforts. And we all do have this effort. It's if we have this sincerity and this goal, and we put in our effort, and then we can bring the mind to a state of balance. This can come up. So initially it's balance through samadhi. So we try to bring up mindfulness and establish that constantly. Because if our mindfulness isn't there, then the mind has already moved out of a state of balance. If the mind is scattered, thinking about various things, or if it's met with a sensory experience and it's gone into liking or disliking towards it, or if there's confusion or doubts that come up, then all of these create chaos in the mind. There's anger, ill will, worry. Or if we've already had enough sleep but we're still feeling drowsy, whenever it is that we sit in meditation, we start nodding off, then that is a hindrance. But if you're actually physically kind of exhausted and you're feeling sleepy, then that's something that's normal and you need to take some rest. So these 5 hindrances, they are like old friends of ours. And these are friends that we feel very familiar with, that we've really taken in as well. So like the feeling of delighting in things, this is an old friend that we have. Liking, disliking, kind of a state of lethargy in the mind, feeling annoyed or irritated. And so we understand that, or we need to try to understand that these are things which prevent our minds from coming into a state of balance of samadhi. That samadhi just can't arise, stillness can't arise with those states present. So we need to try to train our minds then. So we set our hearts on training our minds, because these 5 old friends, they just create inner chaos. So we bring the mind to a state of peace and balance, and do this little by little. But if we try to just instantly bring our minds to a state of stillness, that maybe our bharami, our spiritual accumulations, they're not there yet. And having too much desire is a state of suffering. And that desire in itself is something that will stop the mind from being in a state of balance. So when cultivating balance, we also need to do that with an attitude of letting go as well. So when we come to meditate, if we feel peaceful, then we accept that. If we're not peaceful, we accept that. It's not that we experience peace in our meditation every day. It's only when we can kind of enter into a state of emptiness that we'll be able to do that each day. So it's like someone who's just started learning how to cook, and they're not really able to do it very well yet. So they don't quite know how to do it. And so when they try to make a dish, then sometimes it's too salty, and then it's too sour, and then it's too sweet. And so these different flavors, they're out of balance. And it's like that when we practice as well. That if we want to immediately bring our minds to a state of stillness and peace, then it's likely we won't be able to do that. But steadily but surely, we just carry on training. So when these 5 hindrances have taken control over the mind, then we need to really try to establish and cultivate our mindfulness well. So we have mindfulness in the body, like I explained yesterday. So mindfulness over the in-breath, over the out-breath. over all of the movements of the body. And we recite Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho, trying to maintain our mindfulness. Sometimes we're listening to someone tell a story to us, but we can be chanting internally as well while we're listening. So always training our minds. Or like when we read some news, and the mind can be really fast, it can go out to that very fast. But we try to keep our mindfulness present. We can be chanting while we read that. Reciting our meditation word or phrase, or while watching television, watching a movie, we should be reciting these meditation phrases as well. Because if we don't do that, then the mind is just going to get caught in all of the sensory experience. And the mind which is sent out is the cause for suffering. The mind which is kept in, is marga, is the path out of suffering. So what that means, the mind which is kept inside is the mind which has mindfulness. So we can be chanting and using that as an object of mindfulness to be contemplating, to be cultivating our mind. Or we can keep a careful watch over our mind as well. And if there is a lot of thoughts that are going on, we can tell ourselves that we're not being intelligent right now, that these concoctions, stories, proliferations, that these aren't self, they're not me. That the mind that is, or the thoughts, these are sankharas, and the knowing of those thoughts is vijnana, sense consciousness. But neither of those are me. The thoughts are not me, this knowing is also not me. So we teach the mind like this and steadily establish it in mindfulness, trying to bring about change in the mind so that it comes back to a state of balance, this balance of samadhi. So initially that may be khanika samadhi, so this kind of minor form of samadhi. And there can be a little bit of rapture that comes up at this point. But when we experience that, we have hope as well, because we know that, it's like this, that samadhi is like this, rapture is like this. And so whenever there's chaos in the mind, we try to bring it back to peace, try to bring it back to a state of balance, and recollecting the happiness of that state of balance. And then sometimes when we sit in meditation, then it feels like our hands or our feet disappear, and the whole body can come to a state of emptiness and feel very light. There can be great comfort and ease there. Because before we've always had this experience of being embodied, and that's really heavy. It feels really heavy like that, and so we don't know that state of heaviness because we've always been experiencing it. But when we gain this new experience of sitting in meditation, it feels like the body has disappeared, that we're able to let go of it temporarily, this thing which we have always attached to. That we come into that state of samadhi, the mind gathers together, then there's a great sense of ease and happiness there. That we're not clinging to the body anymore because the mind has come into samadhi. And then steadily that develops into upacara samadhi, this neighborhood samadhi. And there's a great brightness and buoyancy in that state. It feels like there's no body there. And it's really, really pleasant, very comfortable. That there's a great sense of lightness. It could feel like the body is just floating in midair, like we're sitting in the air. Like it feels like there's no body at all. There's just emptiness there. This joy, happiness, ease in the heart. So this is the balance of samadhi. And this upacara samadhi, it's very close to a one-pointedness, that there's a real firm state to the mind. So when we can bring the balance up like this, then what is that like? We're able to change the state and bring it back to a state of balance. And so the next level then is that through contemplation. So watching over the mind. And this is citta nupassana. So nupassana here means vipassana with regards to the mind. So this insight into the mind. And so when the mind starts to move, when it starts to create and concoct and proliferate, then there's an instant knowing of that activity, that that's not me, that all of this is empty, that there's no me within any of it, that there's a movement and we know that movement. And this is a knowledge which is the wisdom that comes from bhavana, from cultivation. Because there's the wisdom which comes from memory and perception, from listening and reading to things, and then also the wisdom from thinking. So thinking that this isn't me. So we can think in that way, and there's an acceptance that the mind has of that, but it's not yet clear. When it comes from vipassana, however, then there's a knowing there, that we know that this is how it is. And so this is intelligence coming up for us, and it's balance on a different level. And so in this state, then, the mind isn't getting involved in liking or disliking, that there's a brightness and a purity to the mind, which is even greater than it was before. So before there was the stillness there and the samadi there, and the mind isn't getting involved in the hindrances. So we can think of it as being like a rock which is put on top of some grass. So in that state, the mind has samadi kind of holding the hindrances back. But when that samadi goes, these defilements come up in the mind once again. Just like when we take that rock out, then the grass is able to grow up again. When this comes from vipassana, however, this insight, then it's an extracting of the kilesas from the mind, taking them out, and that happens little by little. And so this is a true bringing of the mind into balance, into a natural state of balance. So I can give an example of what this is like, that there was one day that I was contemplating the body of someone who had died. And the mind was in a peaceful state while I was doing that. And I was reflecting that life isn't sure, just like what I'm seeing in front of me, that all beings who are born, they need to die just like this. So there was stillness and peace in the mind, to the level of upacara samadhi. So the stillness there. But then the mind began to start creating and concocting. And so I thought then, well, who is this one who has died? That before I didn't see any person there. That it wasn't a child, it wasn't an adult, it wasn't a male or a female, didn't have any occupation. But then the mind started creating, it started to come up with these things. And everything just kind of met at that one point in just the right way, and knowledge arose. So this knowledge arose that there isn't anyone there. There's no person that has died. It's just the elements of earth, water, fire, and air that have broken apart. But there's no being, there's no individual, there's no self there. So the mind was really bright in that state, it became very radiant, and the Dhamma arose in an incredible way. I realized the state of suchness, that it is just this way, it's just this, it's merely this, that the body is merely a body, that it's not a being, not an individual, not me, not you. So I could see the people walking around in just that way, just like they were robots. Or we could say, in this current age, that it's like AI machines, artificial intelligence machines. There's no being there. So there was this knowledge that came up. And so if we touch the Dhamma, then it's like this. And the mind comes into a state of balance like this. So there's this balance of the body, which is very important because that prevents illnesses from arising. Then there's also the balance, and when we don't have illnesses, then it's easier for us to develop mindfulness and samadhi as well. And then we come to contemplate this body and also contemplate our thoughts, that neither of these are me. So wisdom comes up here, and this is a balance of the mind. Initially there was, so it's a balance of the mind, and here we understand the Dhamma. And so this is the Lokuttara Citta arising, the mind which has gone beyond the world. So we develop this kind of mind little by little. We carry on training, keep on with it. Even though in the beginning it can be quite hard, we still need to carry on, we need to put up a good fight. But when we can do this, when we can bring up a state of balance, then we use that samadhi to teach our minds that this body is not me. And an easy way of doing that is we can use our right hand to touch our left finger, and we touch the bones there underneath the skin, and we tell ourselves that these bones are not me. And if the mind is in a still state, then we'll be able to see that these bones are just elements, that they really aren't me. But if the mind is lacking a state of balance, then no matter which bone we touch, all of them are me. That it doesn't listen to how we try to teach it. It still gets involved in liking or disliking. And so then we need to just carry on with our practice, cultivating our minds, cultivating this path of sila, samadhi, and panya, and carry on doing that until we can bring about this internal balance to the point where we're able to let go. So we try to bring up mindfulness, but we also know a state of enoughness with regards to that too. That we don't put in too much effort and also not too little effort either. And so the same with samadhi, that we don't have too much samadhi until we just get lost and deluded in that, but we also don't have too little samadhi. So this also needs to just be right in a state of balance. But when we have this wisdom, then we're able to bring about a state of acceptance in our mind, and we can manage this mind which is deluded and bring about understanding in it. So the mind which doesn't understand the truth, we bring about that understanding. So we try to carry on training our minds in this way. And so all of you here, you have this sincerity to do this. You've all come together to sincerely practice. And many of the monks have expressed joy in your sincerity as well. That they say that you're really keen on practicing, that you've really set your heart on this. And so you've really done this, that you have this sincerity, you have a goal as well, to reach peace in your minds. And so if you carry on putting in your effort without stop, then you'll need to get there. And you carry on cultivating these qualities of faith and effort and mindfulness, samadhi and wisdom. And so this is the right way that you're practicing. You also have right effort as well. And this is really important because if the effort is incorrect, then it doesn't matter how much you put in, you won't gain results from that. But when you have right effort, then results will appear from that effort. And in the end, you'll have to see the Dhamma and know the Dhamma. And you can do that in this life. So may all of you grow in blessings.